Okay, welcome everybody. This is a pre-recording with Tom Barnett for the Freedom Unleashed event here in Perth. It's October 31st. The morning of, we were going to speak with Tom a bit later on in the day during the event, but things come up in life. He's a very busy man. He's got big responsibilities over there in the Byron area. So we're super grateful to find this little pocket of time to be able to tune in and have a word with him and share this with the crowd at Technology Park later on today. Tom, how are you?
Yeah, good, James. Thanks for having us.
No, we really appreciate the time that you've given to us. So as we've spoken about, that over here in Perth, it's a week or so after certain announcements were made around vaccine mandates and what the corporation called the Australian government are trying to push on the people. And Freedom Unleashed was really an event created in response to that, to hopefully bring together the community, bring together all the like-minded people that are feeling that squeeze and possibly slipping into states that may not be as conducive to the world that we want as some of the perspectives that yourself and Dave, who's speaking later on today, often share. So maybe we'll start there, Tom, and just tell us a little bit about, you guys have been in the thick of it for a little bit longer on the East Coast, and just, yeah, anything that you want to speak to there about perspective and viewing these times that we're in.
Well, the perspective, James, is about, it's really about seeing what's going on in the bigger picture. So what we're seeing as far as the mandates and the way society is changing, that's just kind of background noise, really. It's a distraction to what's going on at a higher level. And what's going on at a higher level is there are big changes happening in our realm itself. The energetics are changing. To use like hippie terms, things are ascending. And it's a matter of whether or not we can actually match the changes in, let's just call it resonance or frequency. If we can match that, then we're moving into a better place. But what's happening in the meantime is that people are embroiled in fear. The thing about fear is it's the element that will prevent us being able to move through what's currently happening and remain intact or even here at all. So what that means in simple terms is we've got to find that path back to who we are in the first place. Because when we talk about rights are just something we're born with. We don't have to learn them. We just have them. We have everything intact. But what happens is that we are distracted from that. We're not taught about it, but we're indoctrinated into giving that away, because we learn to argue and refuse and remain silent, for example, when an offer is made. And we learn to try to fight and to live in fear. And all of those elements actually work against us. And so when we come back to who we are, we don't have to refuse anything. We have nothing to defend. We have nothing to explain. We don't need to explain to somebody why, we don't particularly want to take part in an experimental medical procedure. That's not something we have to do, because an empowered voice doesn't have to raise itself. An empowered individual doesn't have to clench their fist and grit their teeth and fight. An empowered individual just is and does things their way. That means not defending, not explaining, and not having to get upset about things. So that applies to everything. It doesn't really matter what we're dealing with. That applies universally. But what that essentially comes down to is, who are we? We've got to remember who we are, because that power that we have, it's just taken away when we're sidetracked by what's going on in front of us, what's put in front of us as a narrative. So then what does that mean? It just means at the end of the day, our empowerment will overcome anything else. What Dave and I have been involved with for some time is, learning more about what it means to accept offers in commerce, because that's what we're essentially regulated within, is the rules of commerce in what we're dealing with. And what that's come to in the last year or two is that if we can navigate these offers more effectively, first and foremost from our place of empowerment, and then secondary to that is, how do we actually navigate it by paperwork or by the words we speak? Like what are they really putting out, and how can we best navigate that from our part? But to answer your question, which you've led with, it's the empowerment part is far more important, I feel, than that. That element, once you get that knowledge, can certainly lead to more empowerment, because it's a way that you can then deal with these offers more effectively. But we still need to get beyond even that as a distraction and back to, you know, who we are in the first place.
Yeah, wonderfully said. And what comes to mind is the importance of keeping that higher perspective of things, even if we are engaging, you know, things on this material level and within the system and navigating that highly convoluted space of commercial overlay of common law. And it kind of makes your head spin. And we are going to get into that a little bit and a lot more with Dave later today. But just being aware that if we can hold that higher perspective of things and let our actions emanate from that, you know, higher frequency, for, you know, lack of a better term, I think that's really important, especially at these times where in Perth we're kind of feeling a big squeeze, and no doubt we can all tune in and see those natural fearful states arising and the anxieties and those things. So yeah, thank you for starting with that wonderful explanation of that overview. When you said that, you spoke about how, you know, we're going through massive change and we're heading into something. And I'm wondering, you know, are we heading into it as in it's already there waiting for us, or is it asking for us to step forward and create into this next phase of, you know, human coexistence and collaboration? Is it something that you feel we're going to have to work hard towards, or is it something that we can kind of allow to unfold around us?
I think it's both. I think it's a natural progression, just like summer turns to winter and winter turns to summer. And there's various ages that the earth goes through. The Indigenous talk about that quite a lot, where it's moving from a grandfather to a grandmother phase. So that's happening, but it's still up to us to create into that. It's not just that we go along for a ride. So these natural changes certainly occur with or without us, but it's all linked so innately that it's still with us. I can't really say that without us, it's always with us, but we do need to certainly create into that. And if we just sit back idle and we don't work on ourselves and we don't have a very focused intention about what we're going to do with that, we might not actually make it through that particular shift. So it is both, as far as I'm aware. You know, it's not that I know everything about that, but as far as I'm aware, it's definitely going to take both.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great perspective to share, both. And what was it that you said there? The focused intention. Again, I like that because it's something where the flow can carry us and support us in that positive direction of shift, but it also requires, I feel, and a lot of people saying that you do need that focus. Otherwise, all of a sudden, you know, your intentions are everywhere and there's so many distractions and things that are trying to pull our energy into these different pathways and capitalize on the fact that we are ready to do something. But, you know, we have to be careful where that goes. So strong intention is integral, I think. So maybe we can touch on, because you're a part of a couple of platforms. You're a very busy man, and one of them that you're involved with is the Heal Me platform, along with David, who's going to join us a little bit later on in the event. And on there are some forms and processes that are on offer to members and for a donation from non-members. Maybe we could use them to kind of explain some of these concepts that we're entangled in and not really aware of, and are probably one of the root causes of the disempowerment and the lack of choice that we feel we have.
Yeah, sure. So when people are given an offer of some kind, they hear the word mandate, or they hear mandatory, compulsory, things that are put in place by the government. They assume that means that they have to do it. There's no way out. And that's why they get into that mode of fight. We've got to fight this. Or they say, how do I refuse it? You know, like very strong anti kind of words. If you think about anything that I just mentioned, it's a real like an anti, get away from me, get off me, you're trying to rape me kind of a vibe, right? So when we see what the government is, which is a registered corporation, and even the word itself, government, means to control the mind, it's just something that is an offer in commerce because it's a registered entity, we're dealing in commerce. So then anything in commerce is an offer. You can't force something onto someone because it's if I'm a plumber or a painter, or if I have a product, I can't force you to buy it. I can offer it to you. I can even lie to you and tell it's the best thing in the world and you should definitely buy it, but it's still an offer. You still have to be the one that says, I want that product or service. Or you can say, you know what, I do want it, but it costs too much. I'll give you this much. Or you can just say no. You don't have to have emotion in it. It's just, you want it or you don't. It's an offer. And when you see it as such, it brings a lot more of the empowerment back to the individual. So when somebody says anything along the lines of mandatory, compulsory, force this, it's all in the realm of commerce. So it's all in the realm of offers. And there are 4 ways that we can handle any offer. 2 are honorable, 2 are dishonorable. The 2 ways that are honorable are a full acceptance, which is to just say, yes, no questions asked, sure, I'll do that, or I'll buy that, or I'm happy. And the other way is a conditional acceptance. And that means, sure, I'm happy to, take that product or service, for example, but I want a different price, or you have to do it on this day, not that day, or whatever it is. You're saying yes, but it's based on conditions. That's also known as a negotiation. Then the 2 ways that are dishonorable are silence and belligerence. Belligerence meaning arguing, swearing, refusing, that kind of thing. Silence is dishonorable because silence is acquiescence. So if we remain silent on an offer and it's been offered 3 times, well, then it's assumed by our assent, which is a legal term. It's consent is the conscious decision to agree, and assent is an unconscious decision, but still to agree, because silence is deemed acquiescence, which means that we go along with it. So we don't want to remain silent. We need to have a voice, but we don't want to use that voice to be belligerent. So that leaves us with a full acceptance and a conditional acceptance. That's what these forms are about. It's saying, it's acknowledging the offer, so we're not being silent. And then it's saying, hey, look, more than happy to, accept a COVID-19, whatever they call it, vaccination, injection, whatever it's called, just based on these conditions. And if you can meet these conditions, then we have an agreement. But if you can't meet these conditions, then we still have an agreement. And the agreement is that I won't be taking the injection or the vaccination or whatever it is. Then it's not a refusal. It's just an agreement, because commerce is all about forming agreements. So we form an agreement, whether we say, sure, I'll take that, and we form an agreement if we say, no, I'm not taking that. Either way, we've got an agreement. We're doing it or we're not doing it. Or it's open to negotiation for future, or whatever it is, there's an agreement that is formed. So when, I'm not even a fan of templates myself, and Dave will probably say the same thing. Where these come in very handy is if you don't have the ability or the empowerment yet to be able to create that for yourself. So anyone can write a notice, you just have to write notice on it. And whatever you're writing is then a legal notice, because you are putting the recipient on notice with the purpose of forming an agreement. But if you don't know what you're doing or how to handle the responses, then platforms like HealMe provide an automated system where all you have to do is put in the recipient's details and your details. It kind of puts it all in there, puts names in there where necessary, and then spits it out. Is that as good as being empowered enough to write your own? No, it's not, but it's better than not having it. So we've set it up that if you're not already a member, it's a $20 donation, and that actually covers the whole family too. So if you've got 3, 4, 5 people in your family, that covers everyone. You don't have to pay $20 for each individual. And then if you're a member of the platform, which, we do regular interviews, I do Q&As on there, then it's all covered in your membership anyway. So it's just that, it's that in between being fully empowered and being able to do that for yourself, and then, being completely disempowered and being lost, and you're in that world of defense and explanation and fighting and arguing and refusing. So it's, you know what I mean? It's that bridge there. So the conditional acceptance is a way that we are learning how to negotiate in the world of commerce so that we remain honorable and that we form an agreement that's to our liking. And then it completely dispels words like mandatory and compulsory and everything to that effect.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm sure that there's some people listening now that will say that, they tried to use some type of conditional acceptance response to their employer. And a lot of the times the employer, those that are told, hey, if you don't implement this, you're going to get a massive fine, they're not aware of these rules of commerce that you've just explained. They're less aware of it than we are. And like you said, we, as in those of us that can't create our own notices in this way, and we don't have that, we're not at that point of self-empowerment, which was a really good point, because really this event and events like this, it's just shining a light in a direction where you can hopefully go and look at some resources and learn and create that empowerment within yourself through that expansion of awareness and understanding. And then that will emanate not only in the notices that you write as an individual, but through all aspects of life, all decisions that you make. So really good point that this is just, even to share a template or to get onto Heal Me and have a look, it's just a stepping stone towards becoming a fully empowered man or woman and being able to walk through the seas of commerce upright.
Sure.
Yeah.
Totally.
But so what happens when we're dealing with an employer, for example, that they don't understand this conditional acceptance process and they don't know anything about this commercial overlay of the legal system? And I've seen in posts and sharings where the employer is actually belligerent in saying, look, this isn't a negotiation, I've got to do it, everyone's got to do it, deal with it. What then for those of us that have experienced such circumstances?
Well, they're leaving themselves open then to litigation. So when we send in a letter, for example, and it says, I'll conditionally accept, or I'm happy to do this based on these circumstances. And then quite often what happens is people get back a letter that says, we don't respond to letters like that, or I don't care what you've said, you still have to do this. And then because people aren't yet in that place of empowerment and really getting what it takes to form an agreement, they think that that's the end of it. They go, oh, it didn't work. Conditional acceptance doesn't work because they just didn't recognize it. But whose problem is that? Is that yours or theirs? It's actually their problem, because they're the ones setting themselves up for a real punishment, because they're the ones, as you said, James, they're being dishonorable. They're arguing, refusing, or remaining silent. So what we do is, the agreement is not formed based on one notice. An agreement, as you're probably aware, is formed based on being noticed 3 times, 3 opportunities, more to the point, to respond. And that's honorable. It's honorable and it's fair, because let's say this is done in the written form, right? And you're posting letters to people. What happens if the first time you send it out, there was a massive hailstorm and I don't know, mail got destroyed? What happens if there's a bunch of sneaky kids in your neighborhood and they like go on stealing people's mail? If you were never given the opportunity to actually receive that offer and respond in due course, is that really equitable or fair? It's not. So we have to be given equitable opportunity to respond to an offer. And that's why it's in rules of 3. Actually comes from the Bible, where Peter was tested 3 times. So then what does that mean in real terms? Well, if we send a conditional acceptance to an employer and they give some response back, we don't recognize that, you can't, whatever they say, that is not what is in your notice, is not the answer to your notice. So let's say your notice has 1 question, right? And it's like, what color is, the ocean? And they're like, we don't respond to, anything like that. We don't talk about colors here. We're a color-free workplace. You can even phrase it as, is the color of the ocean not blue? Just answer that question and we'll be good. And whatever they say that's not the answer to that question is not a legitimate answer. So you would send back the second notice saying, thanks for your response. Unfortunately, you didn't answer the question. The question is the ocean blue, yes or no? And then you would do that a 3rd time before an agreement is actually formed. It's not on the 1st or the 2nd time, it's actually the 3rd, unless, of course, they do form an agreement the 1st or the 2nd time, which is by answering the question. So the conditional acceptance part simply means that we need to give them every opportunity to respond in due course and properly. And everything that they don't do works against them. So if they turn around and say, that's it, you can't come back, you're not, you know, we don't take letters like that, or we don't recognize common law, or because I mean, that's not common law, but that's a common response. We don't recognize common law. It's like, well, I didn't mention anything about common law. So, but at the end of the day, what happens is, if you were the one that refused to either answer an email or get a job or whatever the offer is that's on the table, you're the one in dishonor. So if they let you go, or if you refuse or you quit, you've got nothing, you've got no recourse. But if they are the ones that refuse and then do something dishonorable, now you have grounds for recourse, which means unfair dismissal, which means fair work, which means many avenues that you can pursue in order to get compensation or damages or reinstatement or whatever it is that you might want to go after. But it only works when you were the one in honor and they were the one in dishonor. So James, you said that a lot of employers, they don't know, but whose problem is that? You know, do they have a legal department? Are you their legal department? It's not your job to make them know. They should know. And if they don't know, they should give it to a lawyer or their legal department or their finance department, wherever it's supposed to go. So that means that if you have set them up for them to be arguing, refusing, belligerent, dismissive, whatever it is, then the liability, it's obvious where that goes. It's not on you anymore, it's on them. So that's what these are about. It's not just a one-stop shop. Here, I send you a letter and all my problems go away. Same with learning the language, you know, like learning your rights doesn't mean you can just like put on a badge and a cape and walk past every police officer. I see your military guys, your guns are no match for my words. You know, it's not how it works. It's not the words that do anything. It's the empowerment within that helps determine what you create. And sometimes what you create is going to be a different world altogether. For some people, that job that they've been clinging on to tooth and nail wasn't serving them in the first place. And so the question then becomes, are people ready to move into what is, you know, A, what's coming, and B, what we're creating? That's, like we said earlier, it's both of those. And if we're not, you know, it's just kind of, to me, it's still all a distraction. And then I know where people's mind go. They go, yeah, but I've got to have a job. Otherwise I can't feed my kids. Got no roof over their head. We've got, you know, how does that work? And I get that, but at the end of the day, that is at that hierarchy of needs. That's like right down the bottom, which doesn't make it lowly. Those are just core needs. But then up here is the creativity. So the more we're stuck right down in those base needs, the less we're able to create and navigate that way. And the paradox of that is the more we can just jump into the faith of things, and we can know that we can create that safety and security many different ways, not just within the paradigm that's been laid out for us, which we never created. We just followed along with that. We might find that there's far more out there than we even ever imagined. Far more security, far more safety. But with that also far more joy, far less stress, far more ability to create and find our place in the world beyond just, I work in this cubicle between these hours under that structure of a corporation, you know. That's not necessarily our place in the world. And we might just find that if we are able to just, you know, step outside of that. But if you're not ready for that, that's not wrong either. If you love your job and it means a lot to you, then fight for it for sure. But just realize that the way to do that is the honorable way, which is to set people up to then be the ones that A, agree that what they offered in the first place was ridiculous and they'll rescind it, or B, set them up to be the ones that refuse and to be dishonorable, which you can then use, as I said earlier, to either get a payout of a contract or to get damages or to file a complaint to get reinstated, many different options, but it does rely on the process being honorable in the first place, hence conditional acceptance.
Yeah, and so coming back to that process, so the conditional acceptance is step one, there's 3 steps to it. Are those 3 steps the ones that are you explain noticing them 3 times, or is that 3 steps to the first step of conditional acceptance?
It's no, so it's the 3 steps is the one conditional acceptance. So the three steps means three notices, essentially. The first one is the original conditional acceptance.
Yeah.
The second one, if they haven't performed to the satisfaction of what you put in your notice, then it's a notice of fault. And then the third part is an opportunity to cure, or essentially a default. So that you're in fault, you've got an opportunity to cure, and then you're in default, which means that they are the ones that are going to bear the liability, or have to be proven wrong, so to speak. So it's look, and to be honest as well, James, sometimes it's not as simple as that. You've got to follow it up further. So what happens is, I said earlier that the purpose of the notice is to form an agreement. Once the agreement is formed, sometimes that's everything that needs to be done. But other times we need to then use that agreement to then take something further. We need to say, James, you and I agreed that A, B, and C, and then we need to take that to another step. So then I guess what I'm saying is that it's not just a matter of a three-step process is 1, 2, 3 strikes and you're out, you win the game. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes one notice does the job. But it's just important to realize that once the agreement is formed, that's what we can then use to our advantage. And sometimes the 3 steps is just the initial. So that's kind of what you're asking, right? Is that the whole thing or not? Sometimes that 3-step process is to form the agreement, and with that agreement, it opens up a new process.
Yeah. Maybe if we could speak very specific to one's actions after the notice of default, so that 3rd step has been taken.
Mm-hmm.
What would be a hypothetical example of what might then need to be navigated, just for people that are looking in that direction?
What we'd need to do is, if we've got an agreement and somebody then reneges or goes back on that agreement, then essentially there's room there for damages, or for compensation, or for we would then have a dispute. And courts are set up to settle disputes. So are civil tribunals. So if you and I have an agreement and one of us goes against the agreement, well, now we have a dispute. So then we use a civil tribunal or a court to settle a dispute. What people usually don't want to do is go to civil tribunals or courts, because it can cost them money and time, or one or the other, or both, or frustration, whatever. I mean, last time I went to Supreme Court with a financial institution, they paid 20 grand in legal fees just to have the matter put before the court. And a lot of people it scares them. They don't want it. If you're a business owner, generally speaking, you don't want to be taken into courts or civil tribunals. Generally speaking, you want to settle things privately with whoever you have a dispute with. So what we do is, the agreement is a playing card, right? It's not something that we sometimes use directly, although it can be. Often it's a bargaining tool. It's something that we use, right? So then the way we'll often use the agreement is to use that against the one we have a dispute with, in order to settle something. That settlement will usually be in the form of a monetary settlement, or it could be in getting the job back, or anything to that effect, or even just an apology. Depends on what you're after. So let's say we've got the agreement, and then you're not giving me my answers to the questions. You're still going to fire me. The agreement will be that you essentially can't get fired from the job. That's what the agreement essentially will be from the 3-step process. Now, let's say they go, all right, James, you got to go now. And you go, but we've got an agreement. We've got this. I gave you the conditional acceptance. And they go, no, we don't do that. So now what we have is a breach of the agreement, because on paper, we have an agreement. That's the 3-step process, forms an agreement. Then what they do is they go against it and go, see you later. You can take your stuff elsewhere, and you go, well, that's a breach of the agreement. But then you feel a bit powerless, like, well, what do I do? So what you can do is, with the agreement, because it's on paper, it's like there's a record of that, you can then file that without them knowing, file that with a civil tribunal or a magistrate's court based on depends whether that's fair work or small claims or whatever it might be. And then what happens is they get noticed by the tribunal or the court. You can go that way, or you can tell them directly. You can say, well, look, I'm going to have this filed in a court for a hearing, right? If you want to avoid going to court, I'm giving you an opportunity here before I file it to come to an agreement privately. And what you would be doing, obviously, is keeping a record of this. Because just to go ahead one step, if you go to a court or a civil tribunal and you say, we offered mediation and they didn't want to take it, that looks really bad on them. The court does not see that favorably on the other party. If you have attempted to resolve everything honorably and privately before involving a court as an administrator, well, then that doesn't look good on them and it looks good for you. So you would normally offer to them first. And if they say, see you in court, buddy, or we'd never agree to that, or we'd never, it's like, doesn't matter what you say, it's what's on paper. So then if you've given them the opportunity and they don't want to take it, then you file that in court with the evidence that you have actually offered to mediate privately. So then you serve, or you give all your filings to the court or the civil tribunal in triplicate. One stays with you, one stays with the court, and then one gets sent to the other party. Then now a hearing date will be set. Now you have another opportunity to mediate privately. So a court date set or a hearing date is set. Then you would talk to the company or the boss and you'd say, look, giving you an opportunity, you see that our date is set for 20th of December. I'm going to give you an opportunity to, let's mediate privately. Let's have a meeting and see if we can come to some kind of agreement where we can all walk away happy. Now, if they refuse, again, it looks horrible. It looks horrible on them. But what you can also do is use that as a bargaining tool. They're going to be up for a few grand usually just by having to show up and defend themselves, to either hire their own lawyers or to pay legal fees if they lose, or to even file it if it goes high enough to even file for that hearing in the court. So what we do then is use that as the bargaining tool. And we say, look, I never refuse to do anything. I never refuse to get a jab. I never refuse to do anything. You asked for my medical information. I just asked you what possible grounds or source of authority you would have to ask for my medical information in the first place, and you didn't answer the questions. And now you fired me. So I don't know on what planet that this would look like a fair dismissal on your part. It seems to me as though I've done everything right and honorable. I didn't refuse anything. I didn't quit. I didn't argue. I didn't remain silent. It was all them that did it. So then what we do is we use that and we say, this is what's happening. It's listed for a court hearing. Do you want to keep it out of court? Yes or no? I'm happy to keep it out of court. I'll drop it right away. I'll withdraw it because that's what you can do. When you file it, you can also withdraw it before the hearing date. You write to the court and you say, or the civil tribunal, and you say, look, we've actually mediated privately. We've got an agreement. I'm going to withdraw this filing, and they withdraw it. They go, no problem. And so, but that's based on what they're going to give you. They're either going to give you your job back plus some damages, plus a raise, or they're going to pay you out of the contract plus damages, whatever it is. You're going to form another agreement then. And what you'll normally have to do in that case is sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, which essentially just means you're not going to tell everybody what happened, how much you got paid, what transpired, the wrong that they did. It's to protect them against future liabilities. So yeah, look, is it a really easy road? No, it's not. So this is where people have to learn to pick their battles. Do you want to do that? Do you have it within you to do that? Because if you're going to hire a lawyer to write one notice, it's going to cost you at least $300. So that's why spending $20 to get like an automated template is usually just do it because it gives you something. Otherwise you're going to be up for a lot of cost, usually a lot of cost to hire people to do that. But at the end of the day, you've also got to go, is this exactly what I want to do? Like, get really clear on what you want to create with your life from this day forward. Because if it's fighting to keep that job, then go for it. But if you really think about it or feel into it and you go, is that really what I'm here to create? Personally, and I'm just saying this from my perspective, not telling anyone what to do. Personally, from my perspective, I'd let that go, because I go, every ounce of energy that I spend trying to fight into that is energy that I could have spent creating what I really want to do with my life and where I really want to put myself. There's not a right or a wrong there. I'm just saying that that's for me. But for everybody, you need to decide how much energy you're willing to spend to get what you want. And when you do decide what you want, go after that with everything. Like really go after it. And a lot of the times though, James, is what happens is if you open your heart, so to speak, to the other individual, like let's say it's the boss, right? Forget a conditional acceptance. Let's say I've done the first one and I send it in and I just go, James, can we have a chat? Let's go, mate, look, I've sent you this conditional acceptance, right? I've only just sent you that because I'm trying to protect my own rights here, but I just want to come to an understanding. Are you really telling me that you're trying to ask me for my medical records? I mean, really? Like, do you know what kind of trouble you can get into by even asking for that? And look, we've worked for each other for what, 5 years now? I mean, have I not been a good employee? I consider you a great boss. If I didn't like it here, I would have quit long ago. But doesn't this seem wrong? Don't you feel like your hands are tied? Do you really think the government's got your back trying to force you to do this? What are we coming to here? Or what I would do is I'd invite him out for a surf or a round of golf or a drink somewhere out of the office. So it's like not on the record, and just chat to him and go, James, what's going on, mate? Like this isn't right. What are you doing? Do you really want to do this? Or, just tell me, just come clean with me. Do you really want to do it? Or are you just like being pressured by the government, like what's really going on, and get them to actually speak, and in some cases, they'll be like, man, I don't want to do it. It's just, I'm fearing that I'm going to get this or a fine or whatever. There's a phrase in sales, or a concept in sales, which is that if you don't know their motives or their buying impulses, you'll never sell to them. If you think it's because their wife wants this or their whatever, that's not their buying, their hot button. You got to get to it. You got to get to what the real thing is. So then if it's their fear of the government, then you can go, well, why don't we work on that together? Like, why are we working against each other? I can take my notice back. We can say that never got sent to you, right? And then maybe we can work together on noticing the government instead. Why don't we send one to them instead of me sending one to you? You can do it that way as well. There's many different ways you can handle it, but it always comes down to that empowerment first, and then like conditional acceptance and rights secondary to that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you got there, Tom, to speak, because really, as you're explaining that, I'm imagining putting myself in the shoes of the employer and, thinking, wow, okay, this guy knows a bit, and, he seems right. But then he looks behind him and he's like, well, otherwise I got to go against this thing called government. And, they're coming out with all these scary statements and threats and coercive orders. And that puts the employer in a really difficult situation. What you just explained there is to come back and try and connect with just another human being in front of you that's feeling the squeeze just as much as anyone, and opening the door to a more collaborative conversation where you might actually help pass on the knowledge that you've obtained to get to that point of holding yourself, and look at helping them. But ultimately, it does seem like the employer gets put in a really difficult situation. They've got litigation from an employee who knows how to hold themselves, or they've got government on their back threatening to give them ridiculous fines for not doing something. So I really do empathize with them there. But what you've just said there at least offers one of many. It's a very dynamic process, as you've explained.
Well, the other thing you can do is just, like you said, if they can see that, they go, wait a minute, this guy's actually speaking some, like, he's saying something that he sounds like he knows what he's talking about now. If you actually go to your boss and you have that kind of heart to heart, more than just sending him notices straight away, and you just go, mate, do you realize how much trouble you can get in for even trying to ask me for my medical records, and you're not a qualified medical practitioner? Do you have any idea? And then you can kind of put that on to start with. But then the element where they're like, man, I'll get a fine, and it'll go, really? So whose mandate is that? The government's or yours? It's the government's. So do you work for the government? You don't. Are they paying you any extra wage? Do you have a timesheet? Do you have a pay slip to show that you work for the government? You don't. You're a butcher. You're a baker. You're a carpenter. You're a hairdresser. So you don't work for the government. So you can't get fined for not doing the government's work. That's their work, right? So forget it. They're not going to fine you. And even if they did, I can tell you, because I've spoken to a lot of people, every single one that's got a fake fine, as soon as it's listed with a court, it gets thrown out as soon as it hits the floor, because it's just a hot potato, because none of that can stick. None of it's lawful or legal. So why don't we actually stick together on that? No one needs to know. I'll sign an NDA, whatever you need to protect you, because we're not working against each other. And let's go from there. Like that's something you can do. The other thing though that, you know, is a real possibility for people is that their boss is actually right on the vax train, and they're like, mate, what are you doing? You're just dangerous. We don't want you around here. We're only having people with the jab here. And in that case, you're going to have to really, you know, make a decision about whether you want to be there or not. It's just, you know, I know that there's going to be some complications in this and some different scenarios that don't apply across the board. But at the end of the day, every single one of us, like literally every single one of us, has the capacity to deal with anything that's put in front of us. And it's based on how can we create our way into this to find a solution, to find something better. Because since I was 19, I got my first parking fine, and I never paid that or any fine after that. I didn't know about commerce, common law, equity. I didn't know any of that, but I was creative. I knew it wasn't right, and I found a way around it. And we can all do that. That's something that we all have. Even if we don't have the knowledge of conditional acceptances and affidavits and filing for a court, you can learn that, because the best way to learn anything is to have a reason to learn it. You know, most people that are on this, you know, this event that you're having, 10 years, 2 years ago, I bet you wouldn't have had them. Why? I can go to the beach whenever I want. I don't need to know my rights. You know, as soon as you've got a need for it, you're like, shit, how do I do a conditional acceptance? Teach me now. You know, like the necessity is the mother of pretty much everything. So now is the time that you can learn to do all of these things, because you've got a real reason to do it. But at the end of the day, what actually surpasses all of that is your creativity and your fortitude, your ability to not be apathetic or a victim, and to just say, no, I decide what happens with me, not you, not anyone else. It's me, I decide. And from there, from that place of resolve, you just make things happen. You can change people's minds, especially when they're in the wrong and you're on the right. Or you can create new opportunities. But whatever it is, you will make that happen. You won't wait for somebody else to you know, create it for you or teach you something different. That can help, but at the end of the day, if it comes from you, it's going to be much more powerful anyway.
Yeah, amazing, Tom. Thank you. You've shined, or you always shine, a very bright light in multiple directions. And once again, the responsibility falls on each of us. Do we want to walk down these different avenues that you and many other people are setting alight for us? So thanks for your time. I know you got a busy afternoon, so we'll let you go. Yeah. And best of luck with all your projects.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, James.
Take time now and think about what you got. Look inside, draw the surface curtain. You can be certain, my friends, we got a lot. And everyone's got their own stories of sorrows and glories. We can laugh and we can cry. We play out these lives, and one day this body will die. And I may never know exactly what you go through. I may never know just exactly what you go through. But there's one thing I'll always share with you. I'll share with you. I'll share with you, yes. You are always loved. You are always loved. Child, you will always be loved. Always loved. Always loved. When you feel lost and can't find your way, when it gets dark at the end of the day, try to remember that it's just a part of it all. There is a light inside of your heart, and it penetrates through all that you are. Love penetrates through all that you are. Love is all you are. what you go through. I may never know just exactly what you go through, but there's one thing I'll always share with you. I'll share with you. I'll share with you, yes. You are always loved. You are always loved. Child, you will always be loved. Always loved. Always loved. The true mystery is in everything, and time doesn't really mean anything. Infinitely is how we sing again. The true mystery is in everything, and time doesn't really mean anything. From love we sing, from love we sing.